Welcome back to our channel, your ultimate sanctuary for the most thrilling, in-depth, and passionate discussions about the glamorous, high-stakes world of Los Angeles fashion and romance. Today is a spectacular day to unravel the incredibly complex webs woven within the walls of Forrester Creations. The drama is reaching an absolute boiling point, and we are here to dissect every single breathless moment. The explosive developments slated for the highly anticipated Tuesday, April 21st episode of The Bold, and the beautiful promise to shatter the fragile peace that has barely been holding the Forrester, Logan, and Spencer families together. As the sun rises over the glittering Los Angeles skyline, the shadows of deceit, manipulation, and unspoken desires begin to stretch across the corridors of Forrester Creations. At the absolute center of this impending emotional hurricane is a tangled love quadrangle that has captured the hearts and frustrations of viewers worldwide. The intricate dance between Will Spencer, Electra Forrester, R.J. Forrester, and Melissa Dillon is about to take a dramatic and irrevocable turn, fueled by confessions that have been buried under layers of Aunt Ivy's malicious scheming. The atmosphere is thick with the kind of palpable tension that precedes a monumental shift in the narrative landscape, setting the stage for a day of reckoning that will leave no character unscathed. For weeks, audiences have watched in agonizing suspense as Electra Forrester navigated the labyrinth of her own heartbreak, completely unaware that the architect of her misery was none other than her own flesh and blood. The moment of truth has finally arrived, and the emotional dam is about to burst in a spectacular fashion. Electra, carrying the heavy, crushing weight of betrayal, will finally corner Will Spencer to deliver a confession that will fundamentally alter the trajectory of their fractured relationship. The air between them, usually crackling with the electric chemistry of young, passionate love, is now heavy with the sorrow of stolen moments and manufactured misunderstandings. Electra's decision to lay all her cards on the table is not just an act of seeking redemption. It is a desperate attempt to cleanse the toxic residue that Ivy Forrester has deliberately smeared across their romantic history. With tears brimming in her eyes and her voice trembling with a potent mixture of grief and righteous anger, Electra will meticulously dismantle the fortress of lies that Ivy constructed around them. She will explain, in agonizing detail, the sheer depth and breadth of her aunt's treacherous machinations. The revelation that will undoubtedly strike Will with the force of a physical blow is the truth about the intercepted letter. Electra will recount how she poured her heart out onto paper, crafting a vulnerable and desperate plea for Will to meet her at the Forrester Creations Gallery. That gallery, a place of artistic beauty and familial legacy, was supposed to be the sacred ground where they mended their broken hearts. Instead, it became a monument to Ivy's cruelty. Electra will reveal that Ivy, acting with cold, calculated precision, intercepted that letter before it could ever reach Will's hands, ensuring that he would be left standing in the dark, believing that Electra had simply abandoned their love without a second thought. The sheer audacity of Ivy's interference is staggering, but the true horror of Electra's confession lies in the aftermath of the discovery. As Electra continues to unburden her soul to a stunned Will Spencer, she will deliver the most chilling piece of information yet. Ivy Forrester possesses absolutely no remorse for her actions. Electra will recount her confrontation with her aunt, detailing how Ivy did not shed a single tear of regret, nor did she offer a hollow apology. Instead, Ivy stood her ground with a terrifying, unyielding defiance, gleefully admitting that she would execute the exact same sinister plot all over again if given the opportunity. This revelation paints Ivy not merely as a concerned, overprotective relative, but as a manipulative mastermind who views the lives and hearts of the younger generation as nothing more than pawns on her personal chessboard. The psychological impact of knowing that her own family member would so callously destroy her happiness for sport is a trauma that Electra is now forcing Will to witness and understand. As the avalanche of truth crashes down upon Will Spencer, the storm clouds will rapidly gather in his eyes. The realization of the sheer magnitude of Ivy's dirty manipulation will ignite a ferocious, blazing fury deep within his Spencer soul. Will is a young man who values loyalty and straightforwardness, traits inherited from a long line of powerful, uncompromising men. To discover that his heartbreak was not a natural dissolution of love, but rather a manufactured tragedy orchestrated by a bitter outsider, will push him to the absolute edge of his emotional endurance. Yet, amidst the blinding rage directed at Ivy, a profound and quiet epiphany will wash over him. The missing pieces of the puzzle will finally snap into place with crystal clarity. He will finally truly understand why Electra turned so inexplicably cold and distant toward him. The sudden, agonizing shift in her demeanor, which had haunted his sleepless nights, was not born of a fickle heart, but of a deeply ingrained belief that he had callously ignored her most vulnerable plea for reconciliation. Prior to this earth-shattering conversation, Will had been operating under a completely different and deeply flawed assumption regarding the demise of his relationship with Electra. In the absence of the truth, Will's mind had created its own narrative to explain the painful chasm that had opened between them. He had firmly believed that Electra's sudden hostility and ultimate withdrawal were entirely connected to the complicated situation surrounding Melissa Dillon. Specifically, Will assumed that his decision to allow Dillon to move into the beach house had been the singular, unforgivable catalyst that drove Electra away. He had carried the heavy burden of guilt, believing that his attempt to be a supportive friend to Dillon had inadvertently signaled to Electra that she was no longer his priority. While Electra's confession will make it abundantly clear that the beach house arrangement was indeed a significant thorn in her side, it was merely a symptom of the larger disease. The intercepted letter was the fatal blow that Ivy delivered to their trust. Now that the absolute, unfiltered truth is suspended in the air between them, Will and Electra find themselves standing at a terrifying and uncertain crossroads. The revelation of Ivy's sabotage clears the air of misunderstandings, but does not automatically erase the pain and the collateral damage that has occurred in the interim. The burning question that will keep audiences on the absolute edge of their seats is whether this confession is enough to bridge the massive gap between them. Will Electra, having realized the tragic error of her assumptions, swallow her pride, apologize profusely, and practically beg Will to take her back? And if she does, offer her heart to him once more, completely unguarded and desperate for a second chance, will Will be able to accept it? The landscape of their hearts has changed dramatically since Ivy first planted her seeds of discord. The ghosts of their respective new connections, Electra's undeniable, blossoming attraction to R.J. Forrester, and Will's lingering, complicated feelings for Melissa Dillon, are hovering just out of sight, threatening to complicate any potential reunion. While the younger generation is drowning in a sea of raw, unfiltered emotional turmoil, the executive suites of Forrester Creations are playing host to a completely different, yet equally volatile, kind of drama. Ivy Forrester, seemingly completely unbothered by the sheer magnitude of the emotional destruction she has left in her wake, will strut into Ridge Forrester's office with the unearned confidence of a conquering hero. Completely blind to the agonizing pain she has inflicted upon her own niece, Ivy will attempt to spin her malicious interference into a strategic victory for the Forrester family. She will audaciously pitch the idea of a romance between Electra and R.J. Forrester to Ridge, cheering for the pairing as if she were a dedicated matchmaker rather than a manipulative saboteur. Ivy will likely argue that Electra and R.J. are a far more suitable, prestigious match, conveniently glossing over the fact that she had to metaphorically slaughter Will and Electra's relationship to make this new pairing even a remote possibility. Ridge Forrester, however, is a man who has spent decades navigating the treacherous, shark-infested waters of high-fashion corporate politics and catastrophic familial romances. He is intimately familiar with the destructive power of meddling, having been both the victim and the perpetrator of such schemes throughout his storied life. As Ivy prattles on, enthusiastically endorsing the RJ and Electra dynamic, Ridge's legendary patience will begin to wear dangerously thin. The patriarch of Forrester Creations is already carrying the immense weight of the company's future on his broad shoulders, dealing with the escalating tensions between Brooke and Katie and managing the creative output of his legacy. The absolute last thing Ridge wants or needs is to have his executive office transformed into a gossip parlor for Ivy's twisted, self-serving romantic agendas. The sheer audacity of Ivy trying to force his hand in matters of his son's heart will undoubtedly strike a massive, discordant nerve. The confrontation between Ridge and Ivy promises to be a masterclass in authoritative pushback. Ridge is highly likely to shut Ivy down with the kind of stern, uncompromising finality that only a Forrester patriarch can deliver. He will make it abundantly clear that he is deeply, profoundly annoyed by the relentless barrage of personal, soap opera-level drama that is constantly bleeding into the professional environment of Forrester Creations. Ridge wants his designers focused on hemlines, fabrics, and the upcoming fashion shows, not on who is sleeping with whom or who intercepted whose love letters. Furthermore, Ridge is fiercely protective of his son, RJ. He knows that RJ has already been dragged into the messy, volatile feud with Will Spencer, and Ridge will absolutely refuse to let Ivy use RJ as a pawn to justify her own terrible, unforgivable behavior toward Electra and Will. Ivy's attempt to find an ally in Ridge will likely backfire spectacularly, leaving her increasingly isolated in her web of deceit. Meanwhile, entirely removed from the tense, suffocating atmosphere of the executive suite, a much quieter, yet infinitely more dangerous conversation will be unfolding within the creative sanctuary of the design office. R.J. Forrester and Melissa Dillon will find themselves sharing a moment of unexpected, profound intimacy amidst the sketches and fabric swatches. The design office, usually a place of boundless creativity and inspiration, will become a confessional for two souls caught in the crossfire of someone else's broken romance. A newly released sneak peek video for the episode reveals a highly charged, emotionally complex exchange between the two. Dillon, carrying the heavy, suffocating burden of being the perceived other woman, will open up to RJ about the immense guilt that has been eating away at her conscience. With a vulnerability that is both touching and tragic, Dillon will insist that she never, ever had any intention of becoming the wedge that drove Electra and Will apart. Dillon's confession is a desperate plea for understanding in a world that has been quick to cast her as the villain in Will and Electra's love story. She is acutely aware of the optics of her situation, moving into the beach house, sharing close, intimate moments with Will while his relationship was violently imploding. The guilt of knowing that her mere presence contributed to Electra's agonizing pain is a cross that Dillon is struggling to bear. However, R.J. Forrester, operating with a fascinating blend of genuine empathy and calculated, self-serving strategy, will refuse to let Dillon shoulder the blame. In a stunning deflection, RJ will look Dillon squarely in the eyes and deliver a line that will completely reframe the narrative in the design room. "I don't blame you as much as I blame Will," RJ will state with unwavering, resentful conviction. He was supposed to be in a serious relationship. This singular statement from RJ is a profound psychological revelation, exposing the deep-seated animosity and competitive fire that burns within him toward Will Spencer. By absolving Dillon of her guilt, RJ is not merely being a supportive friend. He is actively, aggressively weaponizing the situation to tear down Will's character. RJ is holding Will to an impossible standard, using Will's perceived failure to maintain his commitment to Electra as a justification for RJ's own growing, undeniable attraction to her. RJ's logic dictates that if Will was truly dedicated to his serious relationship, he never would have allowed Dillon to become a factor, regardless of Ivy's interference. This conversation highlights RJ's evolution from a passive observer to a highly strategic, incredibly dangerous player in this high-stakes game of love. He is expertly manipulating Dylan's guilt to further isolate Will and strengthen his own position on the board. Dylan, desperate to alleviate the tension and perhaps genuinely hoping for a peaceful resolution to the chaos, will offer a tragically naive perspective. She will express a fragile hope that now that she is actively trying to step back and remove herself from the immediate equation, Will and Electra might finally be able to sit down, communicate, and work out their massive, seemingly insurmountable issues. Dylan's desire to gracefully exit the love triangle is born of a noble, if somewhat misguided, belief that love can simply conquer all once the obstacles are removed. However, R.J. Forrester possesses a far more cynical, and perhaps far more accurate, read on the human heart. He will pierce right through Dylan's noble facade, analyzing her internal conflict with the precision of a seasoned psychologist. R.J. will boldly tell Dylan that he senses a profound contradiction within her soul. He will point out that while she genuinely feels terrible, agonizing guilt for coming between them, a darker, hidden part of her actually wants Electra permanently out of Will's life. This incredibly bold assertion by R.J. will hang in the air of the design office like a live grenade. He is forcing Dylan to confront the incredibly uncomfortable, deeply buried truth about her own desires. Does she truly want Will and Electra to ride off into the sunset together? Or is her guilt merely a mask for her own desperate yearning to claim Will's heart for herself? R.J. is not content to simply leave Dylan wrestling with this agonizing existential crisis. He is going to push her directly into the fire. In a shocking, highly calculated piece of advice, R.J. will lean in and explicitly tell Dylan that she absolutely should not give up on Will. This advice is a masterstroke of manipulation. By encouraging Dylan to stay in the fight and actively pursue Will, R.J. is ensuring that Will remains distracted, conflicted, and emotionally unavailable to Electra. This brilliant, subtle maneuvering clears a massive, unobstructed path for R.J. to swoop in and claim Electra's heart without having to constantly battle the ghost of Will Spencer. The sheer brilliance of R.J.'s advice lies in its dual purpose. On the surface, it sounds like the encouraging words of a fiercely loyal friend empowering a young woman to fight for the love she deserves. But beneath that polished veneer lies the ruthless, calculating spirit of the Forrester and Logan dynasties. R.J. is playing a magnificent game of multidimensional chess, moving Dylan like a pawn to checkmate Will and capture the queen, Electra. The ultimate question that will leave viewers absolutely breathless as the episode concludes is how Melissa Dylan will react to this incredibly dangerous proposition. Will she reject R.J.'s cynical manipulation and maintain her noble stance? Or will the intoxicating allure of finally having Will all to herself prove to be an irresistible temptation? If Dylan decides to take R.J.'s advice and throw her hat back into the ring, the resulting explosion will shatter the already fragile dynamics of Forrester Creations, guaranteeing that the drama on the bold and the